Rosso di Montalcino, 2013.
That's good. That's good.
You want one more?
No,
You
it's
want the bottle
fine.
instead?
Yeah. Cheers to the first episode of the series, Which Wine Wednesdays?
Tastes like blackberries and leather.
Which Wine Wednesday?
Which wine?
This wine.
Like which wine?
Which one's
Or which is with wine?
Which Wine Wednesdays kind of use different witchy topics and magical topics that are just popular in our community, but mostly it's wine.
Wine-fueled conversations. Yes.
On the first episode of Which Wine Wednesday, we are going to talk about spells. Our topic for the day is spells. Spells, hexes, charms, whatever you want to call it. That's what we're talking about today as a main subject. We have our guest, Puck, who's also my husband. Start by telling us a little background about who you are and why you're here.
Who am I? Why am I here? That's a loaded question. So I guess in the magical sense, I've been practicing pagan since I was 18 years old, so that would be 2004. I kind of found it through some friends my senior year of high school. Towards the senior year of high school, I had a really cool community center started by a woman named Maven Eller 5. It's called Betwixt and Between in Dallas. So I was really lucky to have a lot of really experienced and high-level teachers who really appreciated passing down knowledge because they didn't have a lot of exposure outside. They were a lot of solitaire. So they exposed me to the pagan community, and I practiced as mainly a shaman-style practitioner. Not so much very into Wicca. All of my teachers were Wiccan, so I learned a lot of that as my basis, but most of my practice was shamanistic. Until I got to my mid-20s, and then I picked up practicing Hermeticism, became an initiated brother at the O.T.O, and I've been practicing Thelema and Hermetic ceremonial magic since then.
And what is the O.T.O again?
The O.T.O is the Ordo Templi Orientis. It is a magical order. The famous members, Aleister Crowley, Von Milo Duquette, other famous authors, musicians have been part of it.
Because the channel that I've started deals a lot with magic and my new interest in kind of redefining what it is, I'm curious what your definition, a quick definition of magic would be.
So I guess if you wanted me to give you a quick textbook definition, I would give you the typical Crowley famous definition. It's magic is, paraphrasing, it's creating changes around you with conformity to your will. To me, once you learn that history and the evolution of it, to me it's the most accurate.
And so thinking about today's topic, which is spells, what in your words would be a definition of a spell?
I think spells in magic are something that are really misunderstood. We confuse spells and rituals. The reason Crowley's summary of what magic is a loaded statement is because there's a lot there to still be explored. Changing things in conformity with your will, you have to get to where your will is, right? You have to learn how to change your will.
Yeah.
You can do a ritual without a spell, and you can do a spell without a ritual. So an example is the spell is your daily execution, right? So your ritual will be your first execution of the spell. So you can perform several spells inside of a ritual, right? Or you can perform one spell every day. So to me, a spell would be a limited set of physical actions meant to help you execute the change that you're seeking, right? So you're trying to apply the force in the necessary area to create the change you want. And the spell is the sequence of physical actions that help you do that.
Because I know a lot of times, especially in Wiccan, witches, all that kind of like the like eclectic witch, anything like that in that kind of area of neo-paganism is mostly focused on like rituals being like this gathering of people.
Well, the ritual is supposed to be your demarcation of something, right? An intent. You are stating your intent and executing your intent and meaning your intent to carry forward. The ritual will end. The ritual has a beginning and an end. The spell is the part of that ritual you carry beyond.
That's a good way to phrase it. I really like that actually.
And that's what people get the two confused. You know, and that's where you get a lot of when people are selling spells or what I like to call the woo-woo, right? The mystic love spells and things.
On YouTube, people do promote this, and they try to sell spells to people on YouTube and on Amazon and all that. Oof.
And you see it.
Etsy.
Or just the misapplication of the word magic to stage magic and Hollywood magic, right? That's what happens when you wrap up spells and rituals, because the ritual is meant to cause the change. The spell helps you do it. When you think the spell is the thing that causes the change, you get all mixed up. And you think the spell is supposed to do the work for you. The work is still yours.
Yeah.
The spell's just there to give you a system to do it by.
I guess coming from the Catholic background, right? Like they always, and I'm sure you've gotten this question a lot, and like my family or whatever, is that prayer versus spell. I think that's because I think it's very interesting. Is that a lot of people often attribute like the ideas of spell work to prayer.
Yeah, I mean, I guess the first question you ask is, who are you praying to, right? I think magic is a very careful line between treating something as real in order to get the effects it gives you without giving it power over you. And I think the word prayer gets confused a lot because there's a difference between the real to pray and adoration. There is adoration to a thing, and then what are you adoring, right? Most monotheistic, especially the Abrahamic monotheistic practices, a lot of them use the word pray when they mean adoration. They are praying to something.
External force beyond yourself.
To me, a prayer is so much as when I do something stupid at work and I'm just like, come on, Puck, get it together. I'm praying to me. I think athletes, when they do something wrong, you know, they'll say something and then, you know, maybe they'll smack their head, they'll shake their head. Whatever response that physical action sparks in them, that is the spell.
That's
right?
the spell portion of it.
But what's happening inside, and that's what I mean, the two can meet and they work together to be effective, but you gotta know the spell helps you execute the power of the prayer or the ritual, not vice versa. The spell itself has no inherent power. That spell is just a sequence of physical actions you've designated as the execution of your focus. If I gave you those same actions with no background, no intent.
You're saying words.
No intent, no focus.
You're just doing actions and saying words.
Exactly. And that was part of Crowley's focus when it came to ritual and spell work. Yeah. Because he grew up in a very religious cult, but he despised a lot of the falseness behind the priesthood in a lot of Christian denominations. How can you feel spiritual power when you're reading directly from the pages to the congregation? You know,
you're reciting something versus ritual, feeling it.
He noticed the difference as a kid in church when someone preaching knew what they were preaching and felt it. Yeah. And reading. Yeah. And I think when you think reading from the book is good enough and not preaching away, when you think reading from the book, you think the spell has the power. And you're lost.
That's why I like a lot of people who do spell work and stuff and rituals, memorizing their parts. Because you memorize it, you get familiar with it, you internalize it, and then when you're not regurgitating it, you're actually like living it.
To kind of put a summary on it is, is spell without spirit is just motion.
Yeah.
That's all it is, right? It, you know, without the spirit in the steps, right? So it's the same thing you're talking about music, even music in church, right? Growing up, you know, there's churches that are crazy with the music, and there's churches that are just singing along. And
seems hymnal and boring, and like no one's like.
That's, to me, that's the difference in realizing that you have to put the energy into the spell. What's like one of my favorite sayings is never trust a spiritual leader that can't dance.
If my spiritual leader cannot twerk, like, I'm not interested. Just kidding.
Dancing to music is another good way to summarize the difference between ritual and spell.
Yeah.
You know, the steps of a dance are a spell, right?
Yeah.
They
I agree.
they are the motion. But if you're not feeling that music, it just looks like nothing, and you can see that when people are dancing. Well, I think what we experience at a lot of big festival rituals or big group rituals is more spell than ritual. You know, they call it a ritual, but really what we're doing is a spell, because a ritual to me is the event that causes change. If you're trying to spark a change, that to me is a ritual. If we're coming together and all performing physical actions, even if those physical actions are invoking quarters, banishing rituals, right? Whatever your discipline of magic is, right? And that's a whole nother, magic has several disciplines, right? So whatever your discipline of magic is, those banishings, those are more spell than ritual. They have a ritual impact because the change is there, but it's more physical action, right? And it's more generic. You're causing the same change every time. So it's a ritual because it's a start and stop event to create a change, right? But it has the spell of certain actions. So I think it's important to realize when you're doing which one.
Yeah. And
to be conscious of making sure you're putting the intent into your spell. A spell is something you do all day, every day, right?
The purpose of a spell is to make a change, right? Like, and that's what like spell magic, that for me, when you want to cast a spell, it's because you want to use magic in a way that can cause change and conformity with your will. You mentioned it was like I think you said great work.
Yeah.
Right? Which is like the ultimate, like, meeting your true will.
Yeah, the achievement of your true will is the goal of the great work.
So in a way, if you're using magic properly in spell work, it would be to achieve that.
Crowley's official definition that he used for the definition of like black magic, dark magic, was any action or set of actions that took you further away from the accomplishment of your true will. In the Doctrine of Thelema and the O.T.O, if you're truly if you're in execution of your true will, you shouldn't be coming into conflict with the will of anyone else.
Which kind of aligns with a lot of the ideas of like the Wiccan reading and stuff like that, which is the harm none, do what you will.
And most spells in those disciplines, right? Wiccans have certain types of spells that are very common. I had several different Wiccan teachers. They all kind of taught me the same different versions of the same spell, basically.
Yeah.
You know, when I was doing shaman practices, there was similar things in all the different shaman books, right? Different variations. And even in Hermeticism, there's very Eastern-oriented styles of Hermeticism and Western-oriented styles of Hermeticism. And so when you're using those different systems to apply the force from the ritual. One of the first spells I was ever taught by one of my Wiccan teachers was to take a penny and put it with some seeds and an egg, and with 2 pennies actually, with some seeds and an egg, and you charge the egg with power during a ritual.
Like your intention.
The ritual was to charge the egg with power.
Yeah.
Because copper is a conductor of energy.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
You would charge the egg with power during the ritual, and at the end of the ritual, you would bury the seeds with 1 penny, and then you would take another penny and put it on your wrist or your necklace, somewhere you saw it every day.
Something that would remind you.
And any time you saw that, it reminded you of your seeds, which your seeds were dedicated to a change you wanted to make. I want to be more disciplined. I want to stop saying the word can't, right? I want some sort of change that you think will impact your life. And so anytime you saw that penny, you thought about those seeds that were dedicated to that change. The ritual was planting those. The spell is every time I see that penny. So in the book Magic Without Tears, it's a collection of letters Crowley wrote to different people throughout his life that would ask him questions. It's the letters he sent to them in response. And one of the first ones is, what is magic? And he goes through the varied explanations, breaking down the different aspects and, you know, what is the science, like the more scientific breakdown and understanding of what magic is. And he said one of the things he mentions in there is science. The science of magic is the understanding of the necessary type of force and the needed application for the desired change. The spell is part of that equation. So the ritual is creating and understanding the necessary force.
Yeah.
What change do I need? The force is the change, right? You're creating the force of change with the ritual.
It's interesting that you brought up black magic. You said black magic, like talking about it, how it detracts from the workings you should be doing towards aiming towards your true will. The idea of when you're doing spells, you're like, okay, well, is it like black magic or white magic? Is it a healing spell, or is it a spell that's like against them? You know what I'm talking about? Like I'm a white witch. Well, I'm a dark witch.
And I almost cringe that I use the word black magic.
It's like,
I really hate using a lot of older terms. I'm a big fan of authors like Lon Milo DuQuette and other modern Ted Andrews. Animal Speak was one of the first books I ever read, because they do really well at removing those loaded terms.
They're loaded terms.
Magic is a system, and especially like Hermetic magic is an initiatory system, so it's built on shared understanding of limited knowledge. You know, in any initiatory system in Hermeticism, there are certain things I can say to one person that they understand at a different level because we've had the same handshake. We've winked, right?
Yeah.
So it's the same thing. Different magical systems mean different things, right?
Yeah.
So and different, like Wicca has different processes, shamans have different processes, right?
For sure.
So anytime you pull a word out of those systems, black magic, even the word magic, they're so loaded.
Oh God.
They're so loaded with history and stuff. You have to unravel the nonsense behind it, unless you know the person you're talking to is that initiated level.
Even with magic, I even had a big problem with saying magic, or really not saying it, but spelling it. I think, and that's a big thing too. Is thinking about spelling it out. When I would talk to somebody, well, I'm just talking about magic today, and I write it with a K, and I'm like, K. I sound like a douche. Like, what is this? And like, so that's how Crowley wrote it, actually.
Back to my overall point. I cringe that I used the word black magic because when you're speaking with people you're not super familiar with and how they'll comprehend what you're saying, that term can go a bad path and you have to unravel it.
Oh God, yeah.
Lon Milo DuQuette and Ted Andrews and authors like that do really well at changing that. So like you've heard Lon Milo DuQuette, my meat brain, right?
I love Lon Milo DuQuette.
Yeah. He could be like, he says my meat brain, right? But he could just say, well, the central consciousness of Malkuth. I mean, like he could talk to you like Crowley would, and you would be like, huh?
Oh no, but he says like the human shit that's up here in my head, that thing, like the material thing.
Exactly. But black magic.
Yeah.
I mean, I like Crowley's practical definition that it's any action that brings you away from the accomplishment of your true will, but once again, that's also a really loaded summary because you have to unpack that statement, right?
And also will versus want.
Will versus want. You have to understand what will is. So it's a deep hole to go down, right? You can spend many hours on YouTube and never find the bottom of that hole. What we would call black magic, a love spell, right?
That's black magic.
Anything that clashes with the will of another person. If you have to force someone to do something, that's clashing with someone's will, because if they wanted to do it, they would do it.
When I was talking about like love spells, it was Lon Milo DuQuette talking about love spells, and he was saying how when you do like you want to do a love spell, you do the love spell and you're like, oh my God, I really hope like Tina down the street, I want her to love me so much, and it's like you're not trying to get her to change who she is. you're thinking, Tina is this girl that I want to be in love with, right? Like I want her to be in love with me. I want to be the kind of person that Tina would love. Like that's what he was talking about. And so what he would do is like the spell work would be like, yeah, obviously gathering the correspondences, like I'm gonna do this and this and this and this on this day on whatever, and Tina's gonna love me because I'm gonna be someone Tina can love. And so what you're doing is you're training your subconscious to, and like the spells you're doing are to remind you and to like cast forth like.
So you're changing
that,
yourself
yeah.
to attract.
So you're not even to attract, but just to, if you think that you want Tina to love you, that means that you think that you and Tina would be great and that you're someone who would be great in Tina's life. And so obviously, if you think that, you want to be who Tina wants.
You're changing what you do to become a person she is more attracted to.
Yeah,
exactly.
And so and that's what you also think of like true will versus want. It's like, and Lon Milo said it really great in the podcast that I listened to, where it was like, and so sometimes it might work and you might be like, yeah, Tina loves me because I'm the person whatever, which turned out to be the person I wanted to be all along. And sometimes it doesn't work out. Like when you're like, oh, Tina hates me. Like it did not work out because that's not who I was supposed to be.
Or sometimes you become the person that you aim to become, and then realize that Tina sucks and she didn't deserve that person.
Yeah.
And you ended up the good person anyways.
Like,
and
then
why did I
even
realized you didn't need Tina.
Yeah.
And you just wanted to be a better person. The reason spells fail. Mm-hmm. There's a couple main ones. To execute a spell properly, it takes a lot of self-awareness, right? Yeah. And that to me is the biggest first challenge of magic. And the first huge step is confronting who you really are.
Yeah.
And I always tell any new person taking up actual practice of magic, your first set of rituals should be all about confronting you. Should be all about figuring out who you are, because until you have a grasp on any semblance of what you are wrapped in your meat suit, as Lon Milo would say, right? Until you have any grasp on that, any spell work you do is just motion.
Yeah.
Just motion.
There's nothing real behind it.
And wasted motion is black magic. My first lodge master, when I first joined the O.T.O, he used to, when I was trying to grasp this concept of will versus want, because I think that's really the core to understanding ritual and spell.
And why you do spells.
And why you do magic at all.
Yeah.
Right? And he used to tell me, sure, someone on the highway cuts you off. Feels good to give them that finger, But then that person stomps on their brakes and hops out of the car and attacks me, and I gotta hop out and defend myself. And then I end up in a big fight, and the cops come, and then I end up in jail, and then I lose my job because I was in jail, and then I couldn't get out of jail, and I couldn't pay my bills or my credit card, and my car got towed, and I couldn't get my car, right? So was it my will for all that to happen, or was it my will to just go to work and just forget about this guy? So I gave into my want, and me giving that finger, that was black magic, because that took me further away from my will. And I'll say to you, is the expression without the execution, is that a spell to relieve that?
That's why people scream into pillows when they're really angry instead of screaming at human beings.
Whether that's the best practice, right? That's a whole different conversation, because people have had that debate. But that's just the question to kind of help understand the concept, right? In the O.T.O in general, one of the first things that you're taught is several practices daily, multiple times a day practices, to help remind you that you are a spiritual being in a physical world. So the first set of spells you're given are daily practices to remind you of that. The food you eat is spiritual food. You are in tune with the world around you, and the first set of work you do is all about self-awareness and all about realizing that the things you take for granted every day are spells. To summarize, the first main reason to me spells fail is the lack of self-awareness. The first tool in magic is you.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, exactly.
You are, if you do magic, you're a tool. You're a tool, right? You're the first one, and you have to get a grasp on that. So the second reason to me spells fail is a lack of understanding of the motions you're doing. The great thing about now is that paganism is practiced by enough people. We have kind of a very easy to practice, middle of the road, which is not a bad thing. Middle of the road paganism,
like an understood guideline,
a daily,
like a.
we've practiced it amongst ourselves enough to come up with a very easy to live daily pagan belief system. Rituals and spells, that is the footwork of magic, and the footwork of magic is the second reason it fails is people lack to do the footwork.
Yeah.
Okay? And that's what I mean when I say when you think the spell has the power, you fail because you're thinking the spell's doing the work for you. So the second big reason is it fails is you didn't put the intent and the footwork into the motion. You can do all the spells to make money you want, but if you don't go fill out job applications and get ready for interviews, it ain't happening. The proper way to apply the intent into your spell work and the footwork into your spell work is to understand the system you're embracing. You know, shamanism has different practices for things. Wicca has different practices. And there's no problem in dipping and diving into different systems or just sticking to one. But you need to spend at least a little bit of time getting something codified for yourself.
Yeah. So for me, it is like seeing, especially in a lot of the like the Wiccan and witchy and like the kind of generic witchcraft sort of rituals that I see or have seen. It's been going step by step. And it reminded me a lot of like being Catholic, right? Like being Catholic, and people would just say the prayer. And for me, I was very invested in the behind the reason why and everything. Seeing a lot of people and just being. They're regurgitating words and whatever, and then I was like, oh, that's crazy, like, because they're just here because of that reason. Bringing it into the pagan world, the circle that I was a part of back in San Angelo, we were all invested. Like, Deborah made sure of it. Our teacher made sure, like, anyone who's here needs to be invested, and she would tell you if you're not, and like, get out. When going to a larger pagan community, like CMA, it was a very different sort of thing where you're involved with a lot of different people, and so you'd see people at rituals being like, oh, I'm supposed to say like, hail to the guardians of the watchtowers or whatever, and like they would just do it, but you could see in their eyes, like you see them, like they don't care, they don't understand, they don't know, they're just there because, oh, these are the motions they go through to be pagan, I get it. And the spell work they do during those rituals, I mean, it's the same thing. It's where they don't believe in it enough, or they don't even care why they're there, they're just doing it for the steps.
I was very lucky to have teachers that were of very practiced and of descending levels of experience in different applications, right? There's a big jump from basic shamanistic practices through Wicca, through Druid, through what have you, through to on to Hermetic high magic. So as we discussed earlier, any application of magic should really at a base level be about changing you.
Yeah.
Because you are the tool that changes everything around you. To reference back to Magic Without Tears, a book Crowley writes, when he's talking about what is magic and he's trying to explain what he means by changing the world through conformity of your will.
Yeah.
He writes, he explains as an illustration, he says, so it is my will, this is Crowley talking, he says, it is my will to share facts about magic within my knowledge with the world. I do so with magical instruments, pen and paper, to invoke spirits, publishers, printers, and distributors, to write down magical incantations, which were the sentences in which he explained what magic was, in order to be distributed through books. That was magic, right? So that was his application of it, right? That was, he saw it at that base of a level. So at the same time you're walking the fine line of treating things mystically in order to affect you. Right? Magical utensils, incantations.
I'm the mystic aspect.
You're treating you're giving things importance. Because the importance you give those things affects you. Right? So when I think it comes to hexes and charms, those are the instruments that give importance to you. Why are you calling quarters? Why are you banishing? Why are you doing
You're not
things,
talking just
right?
to talk. You're
So that's
doing something
the perfect
important.
example of hexes and charms, right? Hexes and charms are just things to focus. So a really popular thing among Hermeticisms is sigil work,
Yeah.
right? Drawing sigils, using letters to combine to make symbols to create effect.
Yeah.
A popular method is to make it into something visible and to do a ritual to where the more people see it, the more power it gets.
Artwork.
The more power you draw, the more power comes to the change. There's a fine line to, at a base level, understanding the science behind that.
We'll talk about sigils in an entirely
Yeah.
different episode, to be honest. But they can be part of
and
spell work.
thinking that symbol has power on its own. So a hex and a charm can be real.
Yeah.
They can be, but what do you mean?
And this is the biggest thing in the pagan community or whatever is I'm going to hex this person. I'm going to make them have some experience in their lives.
Yeah. What you want to do
Yeah.
is you want to get rid of the aspects of that person that are negatively clashing with your life.
Yeah.
Right? And so the first aspect of why spells fail self-awareness. What about that aspect makes you not want to be around that person?
Yeah.
Do they make you drink too much when you hang out with them? Do they negatively respond to any idea you have? Do they find the bad things about anything you think of, right? Like why do you as a self-aware person, right?
Are they negatively impacting you in a way that you need to recognize and change?
Do you just need to stop hanging out with this person?
Like maybe it's up to you.
Do
Like
you
that's
just-
why you're not banishing, you're not doing a hex on them, you're more suiting an awareness to you.
Do you just need to stop engaging? Is Facebook stressing you out? I took it off my phone to reduce the frequency.
And you felt a lot better, right? Like you
I
realize that you're like,
feel
wow, why
amazing.
was I like so focused on that?
And I'm rarely ever sit down at a computer these days to go on Facebook. So when I do, it's my choice, and I'm not so frequently on it, right?
Taking a break, I think, really helped you because now if you do get back on it for like other things like drum building and whatever he does now, like you do that, but like taking a break from it, I think really helps separate you from like the I don't need to be so focused on what.
Well, you got to be self-aware, and
Yeah.
then you got to put the footwork in to remove
Yeah.
yourself. Now, looping back to hexes and charms, you have to charms and hexes work on the archetypical systems that our brains function on. It's why a lot of magical systems share the same symbols. Pentagrams, hexagrams, universal hexagrams.
Or even the different types of gods that different cultures had, right?
Yeah,
Like
circles, god stories are very similar.
gods of war,
Exactly.
different
So
like.
so hexes and charms can be especially powerful
Yeah.
because they play on the very basic symbols and concepts that affect us. Eric Neumann wrote a book called The Great Mother where he talks about the power of archetypes in society. A modern psychologist, Jordan Peterson, talks about some of this. They talk about archetypes a lot, right? So charms and hexes can be very powerful magic because those images and symbols and medallions are very powerful to us because they've existed in our society from the beginning of time.
Yeah.
So a very powerful common charm. The wedding rings that many people wear. It's a charm to remind you.
That's so cute. Look at
It's
that.
a modern day charm, to remind you of
And I'm married.
the commitment, to remind you of
The love.
when things are hard, right?
Yeah.
Like it's a positive charm. Wearing a pinnacle or a universal hexagram is a reminder of your faith. It's a charm. But when you're doing a hex, right? The potentially negative aspect. Are you really banishing a person or are you banishing an aspect? So if you approach it as I'm going to hex this person in order to cause bad things to happen to them,
You've already failed.
you failed because in my opinion, that's not possible without destroying yourself. Because the only way you can negatively impact someone's life is to behave negatively, right? And that is always going to come back on you. Hexes and charms play on our subconscious, right? They're archetypes. They're They're very powerful images that resonate with us for whatever numerous amounts of reasons. When your thought is I want to hex someone, what you're trying to say is I want to get either that type of person or some aspect of that person away from me. So you should use an item like a hex bag, but the focus of that should be things to remind you to stay away from that person, or to remind you to identify that type of person when they're around.
Because the only change that you can really make is in yourself.
The science is not to give you power over others, it's to give you the power over yourself to influence others. You have to put the work in to understand the system you're using. Putting that effort into understanding the system and the discipline behind whatever path you embrace, it pays off for you, because you get to find one that fits how you think and how you feel and how you interpret the world. So you can be a shaman, you can be a Wiccan, you can be a Hermetic. I know Hermetics that are shamans and Hermetics. I know Wiccans and Hermetics. I know Sumerians and Hermetics. Putting effort into the footwork in the system and understanding the codified archetypes and approaches to things is super beneficial, and to me it's the biggest reason people fall short and maybe even fall out of the practice.
That's why I'm in videos, is because like you fall out of the practice is because you're like, oh well, you just for some reason feel like you never had enough oomph, or like you're like, well, spells for fun, but like I don't really believe in them now.
Maybe you focus too much on the spell work. To me, if magic's really about anything, it's finding the balance between the physical, the spiritual, and the mental.
Yeah.
And
there's so much more than just the
growing up exposed to the versions of spirituality I didn't feel challenged. And when you're focused too much on the spell work, sometimes you achieve spells, right? You master them, you do them, you execute the ritual, and afterwards it's like, okay, now what? And then there's not the fireworks. Right? It's at the end of the day, it's still just you and the world. And so sometimes you focus too much on the mysticism behind the spell. You fail to identify that spells are there to help you find the mysticism in everyday life.
What was the first time that you had a specific reason why you wanted to cast a spell and it was effective?
Okay, I was in my early 20s. I had been pagan for a while. I had learned the shielding and grounding that we all learn, right? Wicca 101, shielding. I learned the how, but when I got into Hermeticism and I got into the lesser banishing ritual of the pentagram, and I started studying the rituals behind that, and understanding ceremonial magic a bit more. So I think the very first really effective spell was after I had some time to study and I had really gotten in touch with me, and I had learned that before I could do any effective spell, I had to banish the world around me. I had to... I didn't understand what calling quarters really was. Calling quarters, I got goosebumps when it happened. When somebody called quarters, I get goosebumps.
Really?
Yeah, I just always, and it always touched something.
Yeah.
Right? But I don't know, I just never got it. At the time I didn't get it. Now I get it, but at the time I never got it. Once again, it was kind of one of those things that resonated.
Yeah.
When I learned the lesser banishing ritual and the principle behind it, it kind of all clicked for me. So the first one is kind of it was a spell, but it wasn't a spell. So it was basically practice the lesser banishing ritual of the pentagram once a day, every day for a month. If you didn't complete by going to track it on the calendar, you failed. And that was my first real challenge to myself.
And to me
find a time in your day, every day, where you can take 5 minutes out and without reading it. So not holding the book, because that's not effective.
No, because that's reciting. Regurgitating.
Well, you're reciting knowledge. You're not embracing knowledge. The practice of doing it every day for a month is something that really showed me that spells can be a everyday thing. Yeah. Something you overlook, but can change you in such a profound way, because really what the lesser banishing ritual of the pentagram is about, it's about taking all the outside influences outside of your own intent and getting them away from you. You do it every day for a month because reciting it every day, after the first couple of days you forget the breakdown of the steps. It's all one action.
Okay.
A few days later, the one action turns back into individual steps. The individual steps then begin taking more and more meaning because, and this can be confusing if you're not familiar with the ritual. So if you're not, go look it up. But parts of the rituals are envisioning like a hovering blue pinnacle. So when you go to a certain corner, instead of a Wiccan perspective where you're going to call it element, in a Hermetic perspective, you're going to invoke something. And part of that invocation is to imagine a hovering blue pentagram. So you have to hold that image in your mind as you move around and do other things. And so, the first day, it's really hard.
Because you get distracted. You're a human being.
Well, exactly.
It's hard.
But by the 25th day in a row, keeping
you trained yourself.
all the mental images in all the right places and remembering the words and how you say them in the steps becomes second nature, and they really become effective.
Well, because once they become second nature, they become real.
Exactly. And to quote a more popular person, Bruce Lee said, "I learn everything so that I can forget it." You learn all of these steps in magic so that you can forget them. Back to our discussion on hexes and charms. You study hexes and charms because the basic archetype that applies to your primal brain is something you learn, but then you forget. Because you're not supposed to consciously think about it. It's just supposed to affect you. Those everyday actions, in the end, the footwork behind magic become super effective.
Yeah. You talked about like the first time that you really felt a spell impacted you and it was successful. Have you ever done a spell that's been ineffective? Like you were like...
Personally?
Yeah, personally you were so serious about the spell and it didn't work out.
Let me start with the practice of a magical diary. So one of the things you do with a magical diary is in the beginning of practice is a magical diary, and I struggled with that. Mm-hmm. I had a real problem with it because I didn't know what the hell to write. I didn't know what to put down. So I just started doing spells. I just started doing things just to have something to write down.
Yeah.
And so a lot of the stuff that I wrote down was just silly shorthand. I don't even have them anymore. It was notebooks. I wrote a pinnacle with the sign of strength above it and folded it in my pocket and carried it around all day.
Yeah.
Did nothing. I noticed no effect, right? And so it was a lot of things like that. I wore a specific amulet for protection, and I got hit by something that day, right? Most of this is when I was young, and that's fine, and that's fine because the point was I was exploring. Seekers seek. I was seeking because if it resonates with you, there's a reason, and you should explore that reason.
Yeah. So obviously when you are going into doing certain types of spells or rituals, you have a certain intention, you're going to grab a lot of stuff and you're going to be like, let's do this spell. So what kind of tools or correspondences, what do you bring into doing a spell when you do a spell?
For me, I try and merge what people consider the magical world and your everyday world as much as possible. So when I'm doing a ritual, I use a lot of tarot imagery because a lot of imagery in tarot practices is very archetypal. So it's very easy for those images to touch me on a primal level. I don't have to do a lot of investment into what that image is. I don't have to learn a lot of the aspects of that image.
Exactly, because you already know it.
I can look at it and see it. So
immediately, yeah.
Tarot, I use a lot of tarot. I use a lot of, I like sigils. I like things that are visual, colorful. I use a lot of colors. Daily reminders. I like things around my wrist, things around my neck, things I see or touch daily. When I go to a ritual, I think, what kind of learner am I? I try to approach the ritual not as someone enacting a change, but someone learning something.
Yeah.
So if someone is saying, if I'm going to do a ritual, what should I do the ritual with? I say, what aspects affect you most? If you have a serious sense of smell, if your sense of smell is off the chart, you need to be thinking aromas, you need to be thinking moods, you need to be thinking everything tied to the olfactory senses. And you need to dive into the science of that. If you're a audio learner, make sure that your music is on point during your ritual.
Because anytime you change anything that is going to make you in tune with what you're trying to, like the intention you have, it'll bring you out of it.
Exactly.
It'll immediately take you out of it.
If you're a foodie and part of your ritual is to eat or drink, make sure you have something that tastes good. Because if it dries my mouth out and tastes like gravel,
you're gonna be like, well, what?
I'm completely, you've just killed all my momentum to that change. Ending thoughts. The most important aspect of spell work, you wish you had known, but learned the hard way.
It's not about who you are doing spell work with. It's about why you are doing the spell work, because obviously spell work is what you're trying to do to change yourself. So, if you could say one thing encouraging to the audience and other people about magic and spells, what would you say?
Embrace the footwork. The footwork in spells is the fun part. That effort, the work to create change. We see it play out with witches around a cauldron, but there's a reason that resonates in the human spirit. And embrace that. You know, you're not gonna go get the eye of Newt and the bat of wing. But you know, can you get to the gym every day? Yeah. You know, can you remind yourself not to hang out with that negative person in your life? Yeah, you can. Embrace the footwork.
Can you apply for those jobs?
Can you not buy that pack of cigarettes? Yeah, you can.
Yeah.
Can you apply for that job? Can you write that resume? Can you take that class? You can. Embrace the footwork and magic. That's the fun part. And sometimes it is meditating, sometimes it is lighting a candle, sometimes it is carving an image into a piece of wax, sometimes it is wearing a necklace. It is all that fun, magical lighting incense, wearing robes. But it's also the daily stuff.
And that's why we do things like add the other stuff in, is to help remind us of doing the footwork. So you're saying like the types of incense and the candle you burn, and like you're watching it as you fall asleep and you're burning like a red candle for a certain intention, and it's just like further ingrained in your mind the intention you want, which helps you achieve the actual footwork aspect of it.
To understand the science behind magic, you have to do magic. Spells are the footwork behind it.
Which one Wednesdays? Oh.
Wine is fine, but whiskey